Okay, guys. I had some people asking me earlier. That's good. Oh, well, it's getting recorded. Very good. If you remember, guys, when I was back in doing the FX Street thing back in September, Boyke, the professional FX Street guy, how you doing? What happened in the Rugby World Cup? When I was doing all the webinars 3 times a week there was a lot of demand to do some pivot point stuff. Okay? And got a lot of emails about it. Got a lot of emails about it and tweets about it and all that sort of stuff. So didn't have time to do it the last time, but now I've come back to FX Street for a little bit. G'day, Colin. I'm going to, I thought, well, you know, the first thing is we'll cover off that pivots like we promised to do at some stage. So that's what we're here for. Talk a good solid chunk about pivots. Now I've got 45 minutes, right? 45 minutes before someone else comes on, so I believe. So that's what we're going to talk about. So, okay, good. So hands up in the room who does not use pivot points in their trading. Who knows nothing about them, who doesn't actively use them. Okay. So there's a couple. Well, we'll get there, Boyke. They are I think pretty important forms of support and resistance. Okay? And they're used primarily by the big players out there in the market for areas, yes it is PJ, for areas of support, not so much support and resistance, but profit taking. Which is, say if you're short and you hit support like a green area, for example, that I'm just highlighting here on the chart, if you hit support, you're going to get profit taking. Likewise, if you hit a red area. And that's sort of probably the main area that they use them as traders, right? When I started trading, I didn't use pivot points at all because Bootcamp had this great template, these pivot points on it and stuff, but I just found it so difficult to get used to trading. Treebands, how are you doing? Good to see you. For me, there was just so much going on with trading and trying to work out analysis and all that sort of stuff that I sort of put the pivots to the side for a good year and didn't look at them until I realized that they were knocking me out of my trades and actually being a problem that I decided to actually use them. And I've sort of probably gone from being a non-user of pivots to being probably heavier than most. The reason why I like them is they come in all forms of different time frames or fractals. So we've got down here, I'm going to show mainly on the euro, but hourly pivots on a 5-minute chart, 4-hour pivots on a 15-minute chart, daily pivots on an hourly chart, weekly pivots on a 4-hour chart, and monthly pivots, excuse me, on a daily chart. And you can even go yearly pivots. We've looked at some yearly pivots in Bootcamp and found some pretty spectacular areas of support and resistance on a yearly pivot that holds. Pretty impressive. So I like the fact that you can use it like that, and I like the fact that they are generally regarded as being pretty rock solid areas of support and resistance, no matter what fractal or pivot level you look at. For example, what you see here is hourly pivots with 5-minute candles. And you can see by looking at this euro just for the last, say, let me just move across, the last day, okay, hourly pivots were right up there in the height of the day. In the last 24 hours, they were the bottom of the day. They were also if we just move across a little bit, in fact, they were the intraday pullback in this area here. Okay, and then if we move along, they were actually the support level here of the breakout that we had from New York, the pullback start of Asia. Okay, in Asia, the hourly pivots were actually the resistance in Asia, and we've been short from there. So you can actually see how the pivots have actually been quite important in terms of areas of support and resistance or profit taking throughout the course of the day, and that's just hourly pivots. Okay, you can go into any fractal. This is daily pivots. Okay, and this is probably the thing I like. The thing I like about them the most is in trading there is no perfect solution, correct? Otherwise we'd all know it and we'd all be gazillionaires. If there was something that worked all the time, we would be using it and being successful with it. I think pivots are about as a reliable area of support and resistance as what you could get. When you get to a red or green area, they sort of generally like to stick, which makes things easy in terms of your trading. For example, if you're short and you run into a green area on a daily pivot, on an hourly chart daily pivot. By the way, the time frame you use doesn't matter. You could use a 15-minute chart or whatever on daily pivots. It's all good. That tells you your trade is probably going to run out of steam, doesn't it? Run out of steam for the day. So what a great place to take profit. Looks like a late New York trade, and then wait for the pullback to maybe line something else up at some other stage. Okay? Likewise, last Friday, if you were long the euro, what a great place to exit the trade. It's also a level of resistance to the downside, isn't it? And then look to continue in the direction off there, probably looking for a green area down here maybe today on the daily pivots, and where to get out. So they're really good in terms of support and resistance, and if you've got good areas of support and resistance to work from, it makes analysis, trade planning, and trade management quite easy. If I drew a trend for you like this, and you knew that you could enter on a pullback, which was a red pivot area, exit on a green pivot area to complete the trade plan, wait for a pullback to a red area, and take to a green area, it actually makes trading, not really Elliott wave, I think just saw more fractals and Fibonacci, if anything, Vince. I haven't thought of it along the lines of Elliott wave, to be honest. But it actually makes your analysis quite easy, especially in a trending market. Pivots are very, very good, I find, when things are trending. You'll get, I'm not sure, we just haven't had a great trending market. lately, but you'll get really nice opportunities around central pivots and things in trending markets. See this? Green area, get out, pull back, central, down, green area, get out, pull back, green area. Oh, you're not on the screen yet, hang on. Let me the screen catch up. Pull back, central, down, get out, pull back, central, down, get out, central, manages to fall through the floor here. Okay, they actually in trending markets are very powerful tool, and so as I was saying, makes it very easy from a trade planning perspective, analysis, trade planning, and management. As a more novice trader, I think to navigate your way around these markets. And the other thing was because it's sort of so specific, these areas, that you can actually do things like automate stuff with MT4 robots and stuff. If you know where the pivot zones are, it makes it easy in terms of support and resistance. And a robot is easily codable around specific technical areas. And if you can code what an M1 or S2 pivot point is, it's perfect. No, I always actually plan to get out, Trey-Bans. I'll always tend to get out. Okay. So, how can you do these? How can you work with these in terms of analysis? Let's just cover some things off. Okay. You might look at this daily chart, monthly pivots, and you might look at this in terms of the long term, where are we going? Okay, daily chart, guys. It's a bit of a beast. Okay, so you can look at this for one and say, okay, well, here's the probably the limits of where we can go this month. G'day, Ron. How are you doing? Didn't make it to $10 Tuesday? Okay, so maybe next week. Be good to see you there. So that's the extremes of where you can trade from. Now, one thing I didn't mention that I think is quite important, okay, with these the extreme areas, okay, is they're sort of a support and resistance that's time based. Okay, with the hourly pivots, it's support and resistance that hour. With the 4-hour pivots, you get a green or red area. That's going to be where that's going for in that 4 hours. Okay, you might see this on a 4-hour pivots chart, and that'll be a green area, and that'll be a red area up here. Well, that's the place where you can get out, spot trade, waiting for the pullback to then maybe continue. Okay. Likewise, that's on the daily pivots. That's where you'd get out for the day. And on the weekly pivots, of course, that's where you're going to get out for the week. So they've sort of got a really great time-based sort of use to them. And if you're trending in a market and you hit weekly extreme pivots, and you're up 400 pips in your trade, you got in on a Tuesday and you managed to hold it and it's Friday, and you reach weekly extreme pivots, dude, you got to take your money and run. Assume that that trade is done, and it's going to, if not fully reverse, it's going to at least halt and pull back. This one, Colin, that you see here, DFM, have you got it? Are you listening? Can you put it in the room? This is written by a boot camper for MT4. Thanks. So, if you are in a trending market like this, let me draw in black so we can see it. Okay. No, PJ, it's not, unfortunately. The latest version of GFT, they took our pivots away. We had these really good pivot plotters, bootcamp specific, written for bootcamp, and they took them away. And yeah, so I've just gone to this MT4 based, which has been pretty good actually. Okay. Now, if you're short a market to a green area, so if you are down short to there or to there, from a trade management perspective, it's time to get out of the trade. Agreed? Take the money and run. If you've been short from up here somewhere, beautiful trade, high five, take the money and run. Okay? Now, likewise down here. Now, what's interesting is if you get up here to the red zone, if you are long, say this is weekly pivots and you've been long a couple of days and you're up into this red zone here, that if you've got a large trending market and you hit this red zone, there's actually a pretty good chance that that red zone will not only be a profit-taking area, but that's going to be the same area as a fib level, and therefore, because people are taking profit there, it's going to see potential sentiment change in the market and an awesome zone for continuation. And that's probably my favorite pivot trade, no matter what time frame it's done on. I like the trade that sort of matches up with the fib level, the pullbacks in the pivot zone, and not only is it at a profit-taking zone if you are long, but it's actually the next place you can short it. Let's try and find a couple of examples here. So, for example, here, down to a green area, take profit. The market actually sort of goes sideways a bit, but then it does pull back to the red area and continues. Okay, that sort of thing there, that entry in there, looking to get short, is my favorite pivots trade. It has the meat on the bone. It's not only a take profit area in pivots, but it's also a fib level. If I get my Fibonacci tool out, from the bottom, .618 of the drop, right there, and pivot area, and time to turn over and come on down. And a lot of the time you can get away with just using pivots instead of other technical indicators. Yeah, and of course you'll see other things all around there as well. Areas of role reversal and right. Also, I think it's a 143 psych level and various other bits and pieces. Okay, and that is my favorite pivots trait. Okay, is when you can fib a rise or a drop, and a fib level also matches up. Look at something like this one here as well. If you're wanting to long this market, you may be using fibbing from there or fibbing from the bottom. Okay. The thick area is the central, Boyke. And that's the central, which is pretty, especially on the higher pivot areas, very good in trending markets for support and resistance. Look at this here. Fib the whole rise. Okay, back to pivot area. Take a shot. Okay, it fails. Next pivot area. Off she goes. Doesn't really succeed though, fully does it. Comes down to the next pivot area as another go. I mean, these places are legitimate areas of support in an uptrend or in a downtrend, even when things fail. Oh, do you mean why are some of them narrow and thick? Do you mean why it's sort of thinner over here than over this one? You mean? Well, it probably doesn't really matter, does it? I do look for wider moves on the wider pivots. Absolutely. It's actually, when you've got the narrow pivots, this was going to, the M levels, Noda, thank you. Do you mean these ones? That sort of thinner there, then they're the medium pivot lines. I don't use those so much. Right. A rule I was going to explain about pivots at some stage, guys, but I'll mention it now, is when you've got narrowing pivots, where's an example here? When the pivots are getting narrow, like through, because the day's price action sort of trapped a little bit. Okay, we're sort of maybe at longer term support and resistance, so our pivots are all getting trapped. I will tend to then not believe that the green or red areas can hold. I'll believe that if we get a breakout, they're going to get broken. And it's exactly what you saw over here. It ignored, on the sort of narrowing pivots, it ignored the extremes and just continued. So I'm a huge fan of using fibs with the big outbreak. I like them breaking out. Now the beauty of this whole thing, guys, is it's all fractal, right? So pick your poison, pick your time frame you like to use, and off you go. So you might look at this daily pivots and go, oh, the way my trading is if I see this sort of opportunity on a daily pivots, that's beautiful. What's that look like? That's more like a 4-hour swing of move fib, isn't it? on daily pivots to get that pattern there. That's down 3 days, 4 days, pull back 2 days, continuation. That's swing trade material for a lot of people. And if those sorts of trades work out, you can go and get yourself some pretty good pips. And if you're going to make new lows down here, you're going to make a good couple of hundred pips just by waiting for a pullback to a red area, and off you go. You notice no price around those thick red tang. I don't understand, Boyke. Okay. So you might look at that and go, well, that's cool. But that sort of trades is too big for my liking. So you can always drop down to another fractal like 4-hour pivots and say, well, maybe I'll just use those sorts of trades. Shorter term spot trades. Yeah, it was put in the room it was put in the room 10 minutes ago if you just scroll up. Thanks, Dave. So you might just look at this sort of fib and go, thank you, and take a trade like that. Okay, and this is just a smaller term trade, just correct. Is this what you're asking, guys? This is sort of getting, not really educating you, but I mean, these are the price values and the pivot lines. Yeah, on the right. The current ones. So that's your R2, that's your M4, R1, central, yada, 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 right? And that's their current price. Okay. So if you think this euro is heading up while we're here, you could probably fib this, drop, and say, oh yeah, 618, and a green area. And you can use your tools that you have in your little toolbox for trading and say, well, I'll wait for a little confirmation there. But if I believe we're going up today, 4-hour pivots, to do something like that, make myself a quick 60, 70 pips or something to the long side, great. There's my entry, my exit. I'll pick a red area on a futures pivot up here somewhere, and I'm done. And you can just go through all these time frames. Okay? And it doesn't matter what pivot you look at, they just seem to all pretty much technically fractically work. Okay, you can fib something like this rise back to extreme pivots, continue. Fib down. No, you can fib up here, green area, continue, red area, green area. Okay, so if you've got fib wars on or whatever, they're all legitimate areas that you can trade off. So there's great advantages that I like using with them. You can use them fractically, you can use them easily for analysis, you can use them easily for trade planning and management and where to get out. They're like a one-stop shop, and therefore quite a emotion-free, robotic almost approach to trading if you're going to use them. I mean, they're also great as additional tools in a toolbox that are combined with other things that you might use. Especially you might use them with you might just be using them for profit taking. You might look at this weekly pivot. You might be short the euro right now from up here, maybe, and you might be just looking at this green area saying, that's it. If one thing has to tell me where I need to get out of this trade, it's that extreme pivot right there at about 132.86. That is where I will exit my trade. It actually puts a line in the sand for you. How many people get into a trade and go, where the heck am I getting out of this thing? Ms. Pips, I'm not really using them as stop places. No. You wouldn't know that. Oh, Erwin's asked a very interesting little question there, but it's quite important. Okay, let me just raise something here. Many of you know this, many of you might not, but it's important with 4-hour pivots. Do you see EMAs on this chart? They're not going to get in the way. Brokers have different open times, don't they? This is my broker time right now. 5:33. It's an hour ahead of GMT. I would say combined EMAs with pivots are all good. Okay. So I'm an hour ahead of GMT on this broker. But many of you will have GMT as your broker. And the problem is that generates your 4-hour candle. So my 4-hour candle right now, with many of your guys' 4-hour candles, are an hour different. And of course, that is a huge determination of where some of these green and red areas are. For example, see this here, how it is falling through the floor here? Well, on someone else's 4-hour pivots, because of the nature of how that's fallen, that area right there could be a beautiful green area to long off. And that could be the beautiful red area higher up there, not so broken, to short off. It all depends on your broker's candle. And unfortunately, there is no, from the testing I've seen, you can go through several different time zones. In fact, we tested it when I was testing robots. That's right. We tested several different 4-hour candles, and 1 hour ahead of GMT, this one you see here, we determined the best. But it is a problem with the 4-hour pivots. Not so much with anything else. So we've got our hourly pivots to scalp from. You can spot trade from your 4-hour pivots, swing trade from your daily pivots. You can set yourself position trades from like weekly pivots if you want, or you can just use those for support and resistance. Okay, you can do things like this now. If you're just going to be using pivots as a main part of your trading, is once you reach areas of support on longer term pivots, well then you can say, well, obviously we're going to at least go back to that, maybe particular, in this case the weekly pivots, central. Okay, well that might be a break of a central pivot on a daily pivots chart, and I would not mind betting that there, in fact we can take a look, is that red area on the euro I was just showing you. Just to show you how things can actually fractally marry up. Right there, I think. Hang on, let me just scroll back a bit more. I will go off this one here. See the extreme daily pivots here? Also weekly central just tagged in there. It's hard to tell. But pullback green area, central pivot, red area on daily pivots, continue. So when you see, the idea here, guys, is when you see extremes or central pivots on multiple reached, it's pretty legitimate. So if you've got extreme pivots on the daily, which are a weekly central, that's like double the chance things are going to roll over there. Daily pivots, PJ, definitely I go Tokyo Open on those things. Because that's the first. There's a lot of people that like New York close. I don't know why. I like the new trading day. I go Tokyo Open. Any other questions, guys, before we move on? Let's grab a quick drink here. Thanks, Noda. So, rain. Colin, I like, I've actually had as much fun with hourly pivots as anything else. Like, I see these things as being real legitimate areas of scalping around in terms of support and resistance. The secret about the central rain is this, I think it's most powerful, well, I think from my observations, it's most powerful in a trending market. See, what you'll have is, if you're trending up like this, especially on something like daily pivots, because remember, in a fast trending market, if you're going to ride something like an hourly 20 or a 15-minute 21 all day, that's going to be a central pivot. If this blue line's a central pivot, that's going to be like a 4-hour central pivot. Okay, let me actually go to the 4-hour pivots here and try and find something half decently trending. So something like this sort of central, 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 sort of, you know, just pulling back to centrals pretty much every 4 hours. That's like us riding a 15-minute 21, if you've seen boot camp theories. Okay? That's what that looks like. When you've got the central pivots on a trending market, on a daily pivots, that's more like pulling back to daily 5 type stuff or 4-hour 21. It's all sort of, you'll find it's all sort of fractal. So where I find things most powerful in that respect is that when you're, if we just maybe use the daily pivots, when you're in a moving, trending market, the daily pivots are always going to be in a sort of, let's say, a fast-ish trending market. The daily pivots are always going to be probably the first area of support. So we, over here, we got a change of trend down here, central pivot, got long, pulled back to our green area, which is sort of the fib of the rise so far. Okay, so we're sort of just changing trend, and then continued. Okay, continued, central pivot, continued, pull back, central pivot, continued, central pivot, continued, central pivot. Whoa! Change of trend down, green area, central pivot, down, nearly a green area, but didn't get the long there. Pull back, red area, which is a fib of the drop. Continue down to green area. So there's our fib of the rise now. Continued, pivot, central, continued, central pivot, continue. So you get what I mean? The central pivot is always going to be like the more aggressive area of support in an uptrend or downtrend. They're the calculations, Boyke. They're the M4 and R2 zone in a downtrend in the red area, and then the S2 and M1 in the green. Okay, so that's how powerful they can be. I mean, that's a pretty good example of how you can use them. Is once you've got a trend, a trend is this in blue, not this in black. Taylor, yes it is. Okay, so central pivots can become like in a trending market, like a technical trending market, how we trade, yes, Boyking. In a general trending, technical trending market, that once fundamentals have come out and we just sort of continue, not at a great rate of knots, but sort of general pullbacks, the central pivot is like the most aggressive. And then after that, you'll get the deeper pullback and then the continuation. So that's like, I think this is the secret with the central pivots. When you have sideways sort of congestion, okay, so let me just show you an example here. We've got like 1 minute left. So we're a little zoomed out here, but let me show you. We've climbed to a giant fib of a major rise here. Like, that's a major daily swing formed. Okay. And we're at support here, and then we come up, and then we start finding resistance, and then we sort of get ourselves in this trap, right? Through here. Let me just zoom in for a second. If we're in a trap or go into a sideways market, central pivots just get smashed all day. They're like useless to you. They don't really get treated with any respect at all. Because this is long-term support, long-term resistance up here, central pivots don't get respected. So that's why you need a decent trending market, and that's where the centrals sort of become good. Okay? So to finish up, Boyke, your question. You've asked very cryptic sort of questions in this webinar. Fire away. I don't understand your last question, and we'll answer it, and then we'll move on. I don't understand it. You're not listening to me. I don't understand it. That's what I explained to him. Boyke, just go and do some little research on pivot points. I mean, they're pretty standard stuff. And get this template, and then you'll quickly work it out. Correct, trader. Ron. Anyway, guys, have yourselves a good rest of your day. I think our webinar's over. What do you mean by why not the same PP on the same time frame? I don't understand that. Why does it change? Yes, it did, PJ. Okay. You know what, Boyke? I don't understand. Send me an email to robert@fxbootcamp.com and I'll sort you out. I went last weekend, Ron. Had my little dream. But I am going again this Saturday because my son loved it so much he wants to go. Again. I take my 4-year-old and we don't even get to the kids area. He just wants to hop in and out of Mercedes-Benz and play in them. Anyway, have yourselves a good rest of your day, guys, and we'll see you next Tuesday.